Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another live session here at the Arena 246, the 2021 Barbados Athletes Commission Forum. My name is Anicia Wood, and I want to thank all of you who are on right now for tuning in on time. The Arena 246 is really an initiative by the Athletes Commission to support athletes on and off the field of play. We have a series of live presentations and discussions that are led by Olympians, national athletes, and business professionals. And the whole aim is for them to share their stories, their experiences, and best practices and knowledge with our athletes, not only athletes, but other key stakeholders such as coaches, sport practitioners. So if you're joining us for the first time, we urge you to visit the Barbados Olympic Association's YouTube channel, our Facebook page, or even the Barbados Athletes Commission page. And you can watch those videos from our previous sessions in your own time, of course. And I'm sure you will take away something from those videos. So we had really a week of inspiring and informational discussions and presentations so far. And this session is our penultimate live session. And this presentation, I think, is very fitting for the times. These times in technology and being able to leverage social media platforms and followers as it relates to developing your brand. But I will let the presenter get into all of that. So this evening, we have our session on athlete branding and sponsorship. And this will be presented by Katarina Bitove, founder of XOXO Sports, which was created to help athletes achieve their goals away from the field of play. XOXO Sports works with athletes to define who they are as a brand, to help them understand the sport business landscape, and implement their brand strategy to secure authentic sponsorships. The founder of XOXO Sports and our presenter this evening, Katarina, she brings over 15 years of experience on the athlete, sponsor, and agency side of the sport business. Her experience includes work with the Canadian Olympic Committee, Maple Leaf Sport and Entertainment, and professional tennis star Milos Raonic. With this wealth of information and knowledge and experience, Katarina understands not only how sponsors operate, but also what they want from athletes they partner with. She is familiar with unique challenges of Olympic and Paralympic athletes and hopefuls, including balancing their careers with school or work and generating sponsor support. Her hands-on partnership experience includes brands such as Rolex, Scotiabank, New Balance, Adidas, Land Rover, Jaguar, and many more. And her goal with XOXO Sports is to empower athletes to define their own brand and activate it on their own terms. So with that being said, and not to go too much further, I am going to introduce to you Katarina Bitove.
Hello, thank you, Anicia.
You are welcome. Thanks for joining us. All the way from Canada, that is.
All the way from Canada. Yeah, I'm here hiding from the cold, but thank you for having me. I'm so excited to share about branding and sponsorship, and thank you for that amazing introduction. I hope it really sets the tone for the experience I'm bringing to the athletes tonight, and yeah, I hope everyone's excited to learn some more about building their personal brand and how to secure sponsors tonight.
I definitely am. So I'm going to be taking notes in the back.
Awesome.
All right. So let's get started.
Okay. So hello, everyone. As Anicia said, I'm Katarina Bitove. I go by Kat. You can call me Kat or Katarina. I'm actually named after an Olympian. Can't figure skate like her, though. And I founded XOXO Sports to help athletes develop their personal brands and sponsorship strategies, because I believe every athlete is an all-star and they all deserve the services that all-star athletes get. So as I go through this presentation, please feel free to drop any questions or comments questions in the comments, and I'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Next slide. So let's start with the basics. What is a personal brand? Some of you may be thinking that, and that's totally fine. A personal brand is really defined well here in this quote from Jeff Bezos, which says, "Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room." At its basic level, a personal brand is your reputation. When you meet someone and they walk away from that interaction, that that memory they have of that interaction is your personal brand. If someone scrolls through your Instagram feed, that's their interpretation of your personal brand. So you really already have a personal brand, even if you haven't intentionally been building it. It already exists out there. So what we'll do today, even if you're not familiar with what your brand is, we're going to take some steps to figure out what it can be and how to bring it to life. Then going forward, how to use that personal brand to secure the right kind of authentic sponsorships. Next slide. So why do you need a personal brand? First off is consistency. As I mentioned, that kind of interaction you have with anyone you meet, that's building your personal brand. And you want that to be consistent. You want people to have the same idea of what your personal brand is, whether they meet you in person, whether you're in competition or posting online. It really is important to have that consistency because it shows people and sponsors what to expect from you. Simplification is also another great benefit of having a personal brand. When you know what your brand is, it helps direct you on what to post, what to say, what kind of sponsors to sign. Speaking of sponsors, a personal brand helps you attract the right sponsors. You'll know what companies align with your values and your brand values, and the most authentic sponsorships are really the best ones. And lastly, legacy. A legacy is really important with your personal brand because it will shape how you're remembered, not only as an athlete, but hopefully long after you finish competing. Next slide. So, athletes with strong personal brands. Sometimes it's really important to think about great athletes that have strong brands to help you figure out, like, okay, this is how they do it, but don't just copy and paste what these athletes do. Use it as inspiration. So first off, we have Allison Felix, not only a champion on the track, but she's really been fighting for rights for women athletes and for mothers in the US. She's pretty much synonymous with high performance athletes who are mothers. She wrote a really amazing piece in the New York Times calling out Nike for its lack of support of women athletes after their pregnancies, as well as she partnered with Athleta, and they currently have a grant together to sponsoring women athletes to cover childcare costs. Her brand is all about excellence in motherhood, and to her, those aren't mutually exclusive. Tom Daley, another amazing athlete, another champion, but what he's really known for now, which was so fun to see at the Tokyo Olympics, was his knitting. It's something that was always a passion of his and kind of a side hustle, but he was able to bring that to the world stage of the Olympics, knowing the cameras would be on him and passing the time. But he then married his two passions of Olympic diving and knitting and really grew his knitting business into something bigger than he could ever have expected. And now Tom Daley is synonymous with knitting, and I think he's happy with that. Susanna Rodriguez is probably more known for now as treating COVID patients and fighting this pandemic than she is for winning gold or being an activist for albinism. And that's saying something because she's such a great athlete and ambassador in her own right, but the pandemic really propelled her to this level of fame because she was following her passion in healthcare. So these are all examples of athletes that have used their passions that aren't necessarily related to sport and married them into the platform that they have as athletes to create this really strong brand that both fans and sponsors are attracted to. Next slide. So, how do you start building a strong brand like that? I'm not expecting you to be like Allison Felix tomorrow. She has built her brand up over a really long and successful career, but there's a lot you can do even today to get started building your brand. First off, think about your values. Think about what's really important to you. There's a lot of things that brands value, and sometimes they don't align with your personal values, but you can't really know that until you figure out what your personal values are. Think about what's unique about you. Any traits, skills, qualities, quirks that make you stand out from the crowd. And I'm not just talking about like the crowd of normal people, because as an athlete, you already stand out from the crowd of average people like me. But you want to stand out from all the other athletes. If you think about how many athletes are approaching Nike or Red Bull or any other brand for a sponsorship, they're all great athletes. They all have success on the field of play, just like you. But what separates you from those athletes? What makes you more special, a better fit for that brand? So that's something that's unique about you. Then think about what your goals are. And I'm not just sport goals. I don't know if you've taken the time, but sometimes it's important to think about what your long-term goals are. And I know all this week with Arena 246, a lot of it has been setting goals for your career after your athletic, or after you retire from your athletic performance. So what are those goals? It could be starting a worldwide travel company and you're the CEO living this jet-setting amazing lifestyle. Or you could want to go get your PhD, or you want to retire from sport and have a 9-to-5 job and raise a family. All of those are great goals, and all of those actually help you decide what kind of brand you're going to be creating. And lastly, how do others describe you? Think about the words that your family, friends, teammates, or coaches would use to describe you. What would they say about your values, your traits, or your goals? And don't just think about that. You can actually ask them. You can send them a text even right now. I won't be offended if you're texting during this presentation. You can ask them, what are some words that they would describe you? And take that feedback and start to see what words come up most often when you're thinking about yourself in these areas, and how those closest to you think about you. Next slide. So I mentioned values. Sometimes it's a bit like obscure to think about like, what is a value? So I wanted to give you some examples here. This is not an exhaustive list, but it has some of the most common qualities and values that come up for athletes that I've worked with. So have a look through. You can come back to this. You can screenshot it and even look up more values. If you don't see ones that you connect with there, like literally Google like what are values and pick from a big list of ones that connect with you. These values, you should pick about 2 to 3 that really connect with you, and then think about the words that you would use to describe yourself and your uniqueness and others would. And together, those values and descriptors create what your personal brand is going to be. It's not just what you value and what's important to you, but it's who you are and where you're going. Next slide. So where are you going? Your brand personality is what's going to start bringing this brand to life. It's kind of been like in your head, you're putting together what a brand is, but what does it look like in your day-to-day? You've already done the values, but let's start thinking about the voice of your brand. It can be anything from goofy to sweet and soft to serious and firm, or like super professional. But again, it needs to be consistent. You could be like Terminator, serious, focused, talking to the media after a performance, and then super goofy and posting Squid Game memes online. And then in an interview, you're being super sarcastic with a reporter, and that will throw people off. That will not only make fans question who you really are, it will make a brand nervous about investing in you because they don't know what they're going to get from one moment to the next. So think about your voice. For me, it's fun, it's energetic, and it's a little bit informal because that's the way I want my brand to come across to all of you. I want to be familiar. I want to be someone that you feel like we're hanging out. That's very intentional. And that's the same Kat that you're going to get on my Instagram, the same Kat you're going to get in interviews or in person, hopefully one day when we get to meet. Think about visuals too. How do you present yourself? It's not just visuals in terms of what you're posting on Instagram. It's how you're dressing. It's gestures you do after competition, thinking of like the Usain Bolt bolting. Those are all visuals, again, that start bringing your brand to life. So one thing to remember about your brand personality is that it should always look and feel natural, never forced. You're not a professional actor, neither am I, and usually people can see through things that are an act. So don't try to be something you're not. Again, build your brand from a place that's really authentic And then it will be sustainable because you're not trying to be someone you think sponsors or fans want to see. You're going to be yourself, and that's what people and sponsors will really connect with. Next slide. So bringing it to life, you've got your brand personality, you've got your brand values. Next, you're in person or in front of the media. This could be at competitions where you're doing a press conference. Maybe it's in a podcast, doing lots of those these days. Even a school visit. These are all opportunities where people are interacting with you in real time, face to face, maybe digitally at the moment, but usually in person as well. You should really get comfortable with those situations and be aware that, hey, even if you've had a bad day, there could be a sponsor that's watching that interview, and you don't want to turn them off by not projecting the right image in that moment. So be aware that as an athlete, you have those eyes on you. You have those opportunities to go to places and be on camera and speak to media or people that an average person doesn't. And with that comes some responsibility of bringing a professional approach to it. Next up is marketing materials. A little bit old school, but I'm still a big fan of things like having your own website or a business card. Those are materials that you still design with your brand in mind. You use colors and visuals that make sense for your personal brand. You use fonts. Everything, again, should be cohesive from how you present yourself in person to when someone goes to your website or when you hand them a business card. It should all make sense. And if it doesn't, you've maybe missed a step somewhere putting together a consistent brand identity. And your personal image, I did mention that too. It's how you're dressing. It's the way you do your hair or your nails. It's the jewelry you wear. Those can all be signature things that people associate with you. So have a think about how you're presenting yourself, and maybe there's something you could be known for or that could reflect your brand with your personal image that you haven't been doing yet. And that's not just for women, that goes for the guys too. Hair, nails, clothing. There's tons of ways to bring your brands to life visually and with your personal image. So have some fun with it when you're starting to develop this. Next slide. So in today's world, you can't not have your brand come to life online. It is essential, actually. I don't know a single athlete in the world today that doesn't have at least one social account that also has sponsorship. Like, it's impossible for a brand to activate you if you're not on social in this day and age. And we'll get a little into why when we get into the sponsorship part. But when we're talking about your brand, let's think about how you're bringing it to life online. The first thing you need to do is actually have a look at the social media platforms you're on. Like, what accounts do you have? You actually don't need to be on every platform. You don't need Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, Tumblr, LinkedIn, all of those things. You don't need them all because, first thing, you have to keep updating them. And the more accounts you have, the more time it takes to update. I want to think that we all have the funds to hire personal social media managers, but we don't. Some top athletes do, but Serena Williams isn't sitting there updating her TikTok as well as her Instagram, as well as her Twitter, all of that. She does have a team behind her. So for athletes that don't have a social media manager on staff, be really specific about the platforms you're on. What content do you like to create? What do you like to post? What do you like to share? And go from there. So it's fine to have between 1 and 3 social media platform or social media accounts. 3 maximum, because as I said, you want to be posting really great content on each platform, and you can't just copy and paste. So determine where you're going to be. Once you've deleted all those other sad platforms you're not using, then go through the ones you've kept and audit yourself. You actually need to go and review all the posts you've done. And if, like me, you've had something like your Twitter account for a long time, you need to go back and delete anything that's not on brand. So if you're putting together this family-friendly sort of vibe and it's all about cooking with your kids and things like that, if you have old posts of partying in university, maybe that's not the right alignment for your brand. Again, I'm not saying pretend to be someone you're not, but that tweet doesn't need to be there if it doesn't align with who you are now and what your brand is now. So go through and audit yourself, look at mentions, look at comments, even look at things you've liked or hearted, and get rid of the ones that aren't in line with your brand. Well, I actually remember specifically one athlete that I worked with lost out on an airline partnership because about 4 or 5 years before he had tweeted an angry tweet about the airline losing his bags. And fast forward, he's in partnership negotiations, and then they find that old tweet where he's like trashing the brand. So yeah, you want to be aware specifically of any time you mention brands to remove anything negative. If there's positive ones, you can keep that. Of course, online, be consistent. I'm not saying like post every day, though that is great if you're doing it, but it's more so be consistent in the types of content you post, making sure that it is, again, reflecting your brand. And this is where that simplification comes in. It will give you an idea of, oh, I don't know what to post today or this week. Oh, but my brand's around nature and the outdoors and sustainability. So I'm going to go do and pick up, a bunch of trash around the ocean and kind of document that along the beach. And that's just something you can post on your stories. That's content that aligns with your brand, that's natural, and it's actually really low effort and, hey, helps the environment. And high quality content. I mentioned you don't want to copy and paste between platforms because people will unfollow you. You won't grow your following. And that is, again, really important in today's day and age. And high quality doesn't just mean high quality photos, but it does include that. If you've competed at the Olympics or Paralympics, I think in the last decade, really, you've gotten a Samsung phone. And I think the ones from Tokyo were super nice. So you have a great phone, even if you don't use it as your everyday phone, it has a good camera. So make use of that. Make use of basically thinking of anytime you post, would it be something you would engage with? Is it something you would enjoy? If the answer is no, go back to the drawing board, think of something else to post, but don't post low quality content. That won't continue to build your brand. Next slide. So we have talked a lot about your brand, and that's not always what athletes get excited to talk to me about. It's always about sponsorship. And I really want to focus on how to use your brand to secure the right kind of sponsors. So you can see here that sports sponsorship is an over $60 billion industry globally. There is a lot of money out there from sponsors. And what I want to do is help you convince the sponsors to invest some of that money in you. Next slide. So where do we start? We start with making a list of brands that you interact with every day. And it's going to be a big list. You may not realize it, but you interact with a lot of brands every single day. It's the brand of mattress you sleep on. It's the toothpaste you use and toothbrush to brush your teeth in the morning. It's your morning coffee on the way to training. Those are all brands you interact with every single day. And there's a lot of them. So tomorrow, when you get up, start listing it, maybe on your phone or pen and paper, and make a list of that, because the best sponsorships, again, come from an authentic place. And what's more authentic than things that are already in your everyday life? Next up, think about companies in your local area. And I don't mean local as it just has to be Barbados. Barbados is great because, of course, you're a Barbados athlete and brands will want to support their own. But if you train somewhere else, if you play for a team somewhere else, those are also like your local area, and there's brands there that will want to support you. So think about your local area and what brands are there. Maybe it's a bank or a law firm, a car dealership. There's a lot of brands around there that maybe you haven't used, but they all have marketing dollars, and what better way to spend marketing dollars than a sponsorship with a local athlete? Next, think of companies you have a connection to. So the connection is a personal connection through a family member, through a friend from school, through someone you've trained with and then they've retired and now work at a company. personal connections are really, really helpful when it comes to securing sponsors. So don't negate that. One trick that I actually use is, like, I think of like brands I want to work with, and then I go on LinkedIn and see what connections of mine work there. So that's a tip you can see if you know anyone who works at a company you want to talk to. And then lastly, I love thinking big. I love manifesting. So add those big brands that you think like, no, no way they would sponsor me. Add those brands to the list, because it's possible. You don't know what's happening in their meeting rooms, what their sponsorship plans are for the coming years. So make sure you add those big companies to the list, because the right opportunity may present itself. And I don't know if it's on that list of potential sponsors, maybe you manifest it, maybe it happens. So I want you to dream big when it comes to sponsors. Don't just dream day to day and small, dream big. So next slide. Okay, you have this big long list of sponsors. What do you do with it now? You have to do homework. Sorry, annoying, but you have to. You're not going to approach every single one of those sponsors. You're actually going to do homework on them. You're going to look up their website. You're going to look up their social media. You're going to search them in the news to see what the media is saying about them. And you're going to get a sense for, like, who are their customers? What are their corporate objectives? And if it's a small business, like, corporate objectives may not be right, but it could be like as simple as, okay, it's a local grocery store. They of course want more sales and more customers. So getting a sense of what they want, and then you can start thinking about, like, okay, what can I bring to the table? How can I support them? Then once you've done the research, you can start eliminating ones that don't align with your brand and your values. Usually the values are the easiest to kind of cross companies off the list. Like I said, again, with sustainability, if a company doesn't make any effort to recycle, that could be a big issue. So thinking about that, about your values, will help eliminate a lot of companies from a list of potential sponsors that are the right fit for you. And then go through and look at those things like their customer base. Does that align with the kind of people that follow you on social media? What products they're offering? Is it something you either already use or would want to use? Those are all things that will help you determine what are the right companies to reach out to, so you're not wasting your time reaching out to companies that aren't the right kind of sponsor. Next slide. And so one thing to think about is how much the sponsorship industry has changed since the 1980s, since it really started taking off. Back in the day, it was a company paying an athlete a ton of money, and then the athlete would either wear the company's shoes or use their equipment or slap the company logo on. Those days are gone. That is not how sponsorship works anymore. It's still kind of an element of sponsorship, but sponsorship today is all about fan engagement, relationships, and storytelling. And this is hugely because of the development of social media. In the past, it was only the superstars of a league or athletes from a country with a huge media backing that would get those sponsorship opportunities. Now every athlete has a chance to use their voice, has a chance to grow their audience, which wasn't the case 10, 20, 30 years ago, but now it is. So you guys are in a great place to be securing your own sponsors. You just need to find out how to create authentic relationships and use storytelling to do that. Next slide. So what do you bring to the table for sponsorships? First, most basic thing you can provide is social media content. And these are just some thought starters. You don't have to offer all these things to every sponsor you speak to. You can, but really think about what makes sense for the sponsor's goals and what you can provide. Social media content is sponsored posts, it's TikToks, it's Reels, it's Instagram Lives, blog posts even. There's a huge list of social media content you can offer. Logos are still, like I said, a part of the sponsorship world. So whether it means wearing the sponsor's shoes or clothing, or even branding their logo onto your jersey, that if the rules allow it, that's something you can do. as well as adding their logo to your website or even your social media banner. I think on like Twitter, you can change the picture that's your banner. That's real estate that a sponsor can have. Traditional advertising is something like campaigns. I'm sure you see lots of the amazing P&G ones before the Olympics and Paralympics. So that's magazine, TV, radio, billboards, taking part in those campaigns, making your image and likeness available to a company can be really attractive to them. Mentioning them in the media, say you're doing an interview after an event and or after a competition, and you say you just can't wait to get home and have a slice of Big Ed's pizza, and Big Ed's your sponsor. I'm sure he'd love to hear that. Again, following the rules of what you can and cannot do at events. And there's other things you can offer too. Think about appearances at stores or employee engagements events for a sponsor, keynote speeches, giving autographed items to a company that they can then, I don't know, the CEO can frame and put behind his desk, or they can contest away to customers. You can do that with tickets too. If you compete for a team, or even if you're competing at a world championship, if you can get your sponsor a couple tickets, and they can make a trip out of it. It's just using things that you have in a way to attract sponsors and give value to a partnership. Next slide. What do sponsors want? I mentioned before, they want a lot, but they're all things that you have. First, they want reach. Your follower number is important, but it's not the only thing that matters. It's the quality of the audience that they really want. They want to see it growing. They want to see you engaging with those fans and creating a really great community, because your followers are currency. They're potential customers for a brand. So those are important. Relevance is really important too. So if you don't use business accounts for your social media, thinking of particularly Instagram, they offer great, if you switch to a business profile, you'll actually be able to get demographic information about your followers, the gender, their location, even like their interests. So those are statistics that are important to a potential sponsor, and they want to see that information overlap with their customers. And that means that your fan base is relevant to them. Resonance is basically engagement rate. They want to know that you didn't just go and buy 10,000 followers. Please never buy followers. It's really, really bad for your brand, and sponsors know when followers are purchased. But they want to see high engagement rates. And if you don't know how to calculate that, basically it's your total number of engagements on, say, an Instagram picture. So likes, comments, shares, saves, divided by your total number of followers times 100. And that's your engagement rate. And they want to see return. They want to see their sales increase, or their brand awareness or brand perception increase. The sponsor's literally making an investment in you, so you need to show them a return on that investment. It is a business relationship. They're not just giving money out of the goodness of their heart. That would be a donation, not a sponsorship. A sponsorship is a business relationship, and it's on you to show them the value of that. Next slide. All right, so you have the list of sponsors. You've thought about what you can provide. Now, how do you actually connect with them? It's really done a lot on social media now. It's actually probably the number one way athletes are connecting with brands. Sometimes people forget that there's an actual person behind that brand's Instagram account that's running it. A friend of mine is a social media manager for a big brand, and I think sometimes people forget that he's a real person, that there's a real person behind it. So when you DM a brand, there's an actual person reading it. So don't forget that. One tip when you're reaching out on social media, make sure you're following the company before you reach out. There's nothing worse than a social media manager seeing a request for a partnership or even a conversation and the athlete's not following the company. Another tip, actually, you'll get bonus points if in the past you have mentioned or tagged that brand in other posts. They can see, the social media manager will see that there is a longer term relationship and that you've been a fan and customer of theirs for a while. And again, authenticity is the best place to start for a sponsorship relationship. You can email the company, or if you go on their website, it might have like a form submission. And again, there's an actual person that will read that email. So go to the website, check out the contact us or contact information, and you can send an email that way. I find social media is a little better because, again, there is a real person sitting there posting every day for a brand. So sometimes an email or a website submission might take a little longer for someone to actually get to it. LinkedIn is super normal for athletes and for kind of business people to reach out and connect. So when you're on LinkedIn, if you're looking at a brand's page and looking at the people that work there, trying to figure out who to message, look for job titles like partnership, influencer, or marketing manager. You want to go to manager level because something like a coordinator might be a little too junior to make these sort of decisions. And if you look at like the CEO or VP, they might be pretty busy. So I find a manager is a good level that even if they can't make the decision on sponsorships, they would be a great introduction and be able to get you in front of someone that can help you out. Networking, tried and true, literally in person at events, whether you're at a fundraiser or a team event. And honestly, if you think about the competitions you've been at, and you know, like there's like little tents or stands, and there's companies there giving out Cliff Bars or whatever. There's actual sponsorship people that if they're not running that themselves, they're there checking in on the staff and making sure the sponsorship activation is going well. So walk over there, introduce yourself. I don't know if you've ever thought about it that way, but there's a lot of money and effort that goes into those sorts of tents and giveaways and activations at competitions. And even at the Olympics or Paralympics, Coca-Cola will have its giant hosting house. Walk in there and see who you can meet. There's an amazing way to network at events that you're already at. You don't even have to go out of your way. You're already there. And online platforms. I'm sure you've heard of things like Open Sponsorship, Firework, Open Doors, Influencer. These are online platforms that you basically create a profile for, and there's brands on there that will post campaign opportunities, and you apply and it matches you up. Those are great options. Usually it's a little more campaign focused opposed to long-term relationships, but you can always build a relationship after completing a successful campaign with a brand. The one thing to note about that is that there's lots of competition on those platforms, and there's also fees associated with using them and securing partnerships on them. Not to say don't use them. They're always a great thing to check out and try out. And it might be a great way to first get an introduction to a brand that you never would have connected with in any other way. Next slide. So you figured out how to connect with a brand. What do you actually say? Here are a few tips for writing that first email, that DM. I'd say keep it short and sweet, under 250 words. The people that read it are busy people. You're not number one priority, so it's important to keep it concise. You don't need to put your full record of achievements in your sport. They have Google, they'll look you up. So keep it short and sweet, but really make it clear that you are looking for a partnership and that you want to meet to discuss it. This will show that you're professional, that you are to the point, and it will give them the opportunity. If it's not in their plans or budget, they can say a quick no, but more often than not, something like a really professional, concise introduction email or message will at least get you a meeting. So take some time and think about it, and don't copy and paste. Don't send the same one to every different company you reach out to. You need to take the time to customize it to each sponsor. Next slide. So this is an example of a sort of message that you would write to a brand. I'm not going to read it. You can screenshot it. You can watch this again later. But notice how I use the person's name. It's super important to personalize it. You don't want it to say to whom it may concern. If you don't have an idea of who it's going to, try the LinkedIn route, but it's always better to address it to a specific person than kind of send it out blindly. And I'm not going to kind of go into too much detail, but again, like, don't copy and paste this to, like, and don't use this one specifically, because a brand will be able to tell that, like, I wrote this versus you. It needs to come from your voice. Take the time to put your love and attention into it. Next slide. All right. After you make your contact with the brand, you've asked for a meeting. And what happens in that meeting? That is your pitch. And with a pitch, you need a pitch deck. If you're not familiar with the term, it's basically a marketing industry term that means PowerPoint. A deck is a PowerPoint. What you should do is prepare this ahead of time and have it ready to practice. It should be maximum 5 slides. Again, these people are busy. They want you to get to the point, and customized to the brand you're presenting to. You should save it as a PDF so it doesn't go all wonky when you're presenting. And again, use those high quality images. You want to use consistent colors and fonts to show that you're a professional, and to, again, show how thoughtful and attentive you are to your brand and how consistent it is. So you want to set the right tone in this meeting with the brand. Next slide. So the second slide is going to be about you. Not going to include your entire history. The company will Google you for sure, and they'll check out your social media. You want to stick to what about you and your followers is most relevant and attractive to the brand. So putting in your demographics, engagement rate, and maybe you have a personal goal that's relevant to the sponsor. Maybe you are vegan and want to start a vegan restaurant, and the company you're talking to is a vegan cosmetics company. Things that are, maybe they're not exactly related, but they're relevant, are important to include, because it will show that there's an authentic relationship between who you are and what the sponsor company is. Next slide. Partnership ideas. This is where you get to show off some ideas you've come up with on how to bring the partnership to life, what you can offer. Use images if you have them. Specifically, if you're speaking to a company that's never sponsored an athlete before, they may not know what a sponsored post may look like, or what you can provide them, or where on your jersey a logo would go. So images are really important to use if you have them. One note here for Rule 40 for both Olympic athletes, and there's the equivalent rule for Paralympic athletes. Don't promise anything in the partnership you can't actually provide. Like, don't say, oh, and I'll wear a hat with your logo on the podium at the Olympic Games. You can't do that at all. So don't promise it. Always check Rule 40 before you commit to offering something to a sponsor. Next slide. The terms, this is the bread and butter of a deal. This is the financial or the contribution that you're asking a sponsor for. Pricing yourself can be tricky, it can be awkward, but you have to do it. You have to give them some sort of ballpark of what you're asking for. If you have no idea where to start, which can be difficult, start at $100 per deliverable. And a deliverable is things like a 30-minute appearance, a social media post, a logo placement for a month, or a signed item. This is very low, and again, it's very basic, but it's somewhere to start. So a 30-minute appearance, $100, 2 signed items, $200. Start there, and then factor in things like how many followers you have, what your engagement rate is. If it's anywhere over 5%, it's good. If it's over 10%, amazing. So you should be asking for more. And then achievements. If you're a 3-time gold medalist, that increases your value to a brand. So start at $100 per deliverable, but build up from there. And always ask for 10% more than that total number you come up with, because it's a negotiation. Very rarely a brand will say, yes, exactly what you're asking for is what we're going to give you. If it happens, amazing. But they'll be expecting to negotiate. So if you ask for 10% more and get it, that's great. But usually they'll come back a little lower, and you have some wiggle room to negotiate within that. Next slide. And then 5th slide, you wrap it up. Make sure your contact info is on there. Sometimes the person will forward it to someone else internally that doesn't have your email or your phone number. So always include it on there so they know who to reach out to when they want to follow up and sign you as an athlete. Next slide. To get ready for your pitch, same thing as you would do for a competition. You have to practice. You need to run through it. You need to do it for other people. You need to get feedback. You can't just go in cold and expect to nail it. Use high quality images, and that will make sure you come off as really professional and polished, as well as being specific about what you can offer. You don't want to just say social media posts, because that could mean 5 tweets or it could mean 20 TikTok videos. And there's a huge difference of commitment between those types of posts. So be specific about what you can offer and be confident. The company would be really lucky to work with you, and you'd be just as lucky to work with them. So be excited about it, be confident, and know your value. Next slide. So I mentioned dollar amounts, and that can be cash. Cash is actually the most traditional form of sponsorship, and that's great, but there's also other kinds. Thinking of products or services, sometimes a brand will offer you the equivalent amount in products or service. It could be plane tickets, hotel stays, training, or physio services. Those are all things that are sponsorships that if you were paying out of pocket, maybe you'd spend $2,000 on them, but maybe a company will provide you that $2,000 in value for free. Jobs and education is another great one. Maybe an athletic wear brand will give you a summer internship when you're in your off season. And sometimes a partnership is a combination of all three. So you could get a little bit of cash per month, free product, and an internship in the off season. Next slide. When you're negotiating, again, can be awkward. My tip is actually to think about when that you're negotiating for someone else or some other company, that you're not doing it for yourself. So it removes that element of like stress and anxiety for it being like your personal dollars that are up for conversation. So you've already determined your value. It will get easier the more conversations you have with brands and the more you start to understand where you sit in the marketplace. Again, ask for a little more, 10% more, to give you that negotiation wiggle room. And finally, stay strong. Partnership conversations will usually last from about a month or two from the moment you first reach out to a brand to when you seal the deal. Larger organizations, bigger companies sometimes take around 2 months because they have a lot of levels of approvals to go through, and that's okay. But if it's really dragging on and you're putting in a lot of work and there's a lot of back and forth, you need to know when to walk away. And if they're not willing to meet you somewhere where you know your value is, that's okay. Walk away and find the right kind of partner. Next slide. I always recommend and strongly suggest that a lawyer looks over any sponsorship agreement before you sign it. It is a legal contract, and you do need to have someone with that expertise looking over. And maybe if you don't know a lawyer, you could have someone who has business or law experience, or if you have an agent, having an agent look over is great, just so you understand really what you're committing to. Again, it's a legal document, so you don't want to just sign it on the spot. So take some time and have input on it before you sign it. Next slide. And it's not done once you sign the deal. A partnership actually kind of just begins when you sign on the dotted line to secure a sponsor, because then you actually have to fulfill everything you've committed to. You have to do the social media posts. You have to talk about the company in the media. You have to make sure the sticker's on your equipment. All of those things have to be done, and you have to track them to make sure that you're doing everything that you committed. And vice versa, make sure your sponsor's hitting what they committed to you, whether it's deliveries of product every month or payment dates for your sponsorship fees. Keep track of what they've committed to and where they're at, so there's no surprises. And thinking forward, it could be a year deal, it could be 2 years, it could be 4 years. Life is busy, games come and go. Put it in your calendar when the deal is expiring and put a reminder a few months before to remind you that, okay, where am I at with fulfilling this? Where's my sponsor at with fulfillment? And you can start conversations about renewing the sponsor. It's always easier to renew a sponsor than to sign a new one. So ideally, this has been a really great, successful partnership and you want to continue it for another few years. That's a great time to show them how you fulfilled everything you committed to, how great the results have been, and to ask them to extend it. Sometimes you outgrow a sponsor or their brand direction changes, so renewal is not the right fit, but generally, if you have a great relationship with a company, you'll want to continue it. And you're going to be in different phases. You might be signing a new sponsor, renewing an old one, and doing research on a third one. You're going to be in different phases of the sponsorship cycle all the time, but you'll get used to it and you're going to get better at it the more you do it. So starting out's always the hardest part, just like with your sport. And then after a while, it becomes second nature. So I hope that you've taken a lot from these branding tips and sponsorship strategies that I've shared with you, because there's something that they're practical. And if you start implementing them tomorrow, I guarantee you'll start seeing success over the next few months. Next slide. So we're coming up to the end of the presentation. Anicia, are there any questions?
So I'm not seeing any questions as yet. I'm going to give the audience a chance to populate the chat. So if you have a question, you could just type it in there, whether you're on YouTube or on Facebook. But in the meantime, I mean, Katarina, you have delivered amazing information. I wish I knew these steps when I was an active athlete, when I was playing professionally. But it's great information. I actually think it could be applied not just to athletes, but let's say to active athletes. Let's say an athlete who has transitioned from sport, they could use this information to build their brand as well. They don't necessarily have to be still competing. They could take this if they have a small business or business for that matter. And I believe these tips can be applied to, different contexts or persons at different stages in their career. So thank you so much for that information. I am hoping those who are watching and those who will watch the video in the future, that they find the presentation worthwhile and beneficial as well. I certainly did. And I'm just hoping they're able to take pieces, if not all, and apply it to, different aspects of their brand building, so to speak. So I'll just wait here a bit to see if there are any questions. I have a couple because I was taking notes, please. And I have a couple.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned, you don't necessarily need to be on every single social media platform.
Yeah.
Are there any recommended top 3 platforms that you would, recommend for anyone trying to build their brand?
I'd say Instagram is a really big one, obviously. It's one of the most popular platforms, and almost every brand has at least an Instagram profile. TikTok is something that 2 years ago was barely on my radar. And the amount of dollars I'm seeing companies investing in TikTok campaigns and sponsoring TikTok creators is growing exponentially. And actually, there's not a ton of Olympic and Paralympic athletes that are doing it amazingly well. There's some that are crushing it, but there's a huge gap there, and it's only going to get more and more popular, I believe, heading through Beijing, but towards Paris. So keep an eye on TikTok. If you're not on it, maybe try it out. Maybe it's something you love. It is hard to post or to create the videos. I've tried. It takes skill, but it's somewhere that I'm seeing a lot of investment in. And in terms of social, I actually consider LinkedIn social. And that's for even if you don't have a company, if you're an athlete that's just competing or you're still in school, you still have experience you can post, and it's a great way to connect with people at companies or other athletes to get insights from them. So those would be probably my big ones. Everyone still, I think, has a Facebook, but if it's not something you're actively posting about your athletic journey or your brand, just make it private. you can use it to update your aunts and uncles about where you're at in the world. We all have it, so you don't have to delete necessarily something like Facebook, but make it private and keep it just for close family and friends.
So TikTok, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Yes.
So in terms of the engagement rate formula, like you mentioned it, but could you just mention it one more time in terms of how you calculate it?
So your engagement is the number of engagements on any given post. So say like I posted a picture on Instagram and it got likes, shares, and saves and comments. You add up all of those together and then you divide it by your total number of followers. So that's just on one post, and you're going to do that for, say, your top 9 posts and then get the average of that. One thing that I've seen that's really great that some athletes do is they actually do it for their sponsored posts. So say you've done a few like sponsored posts for other brands. If you have a good engagement rate for that, that's something to pull out specifically to be like, I get 10% engagement rate on my sponsored posts. That looks really good to a brand.
Okay, noted. And we have one comment here from Melissa. She stated, I enjoyed your presentation, Katarina. Feverishly took notes, and I'm not even an athlete. Thanks, Anisia and the BOA, for exposing Barbados to the knowledge and the experience of these excellent presenters.
Oh, that's
Thank you,
great.
Melissa. That is good to hear.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, everyone does have a personal brand. I have a personal brand. You do. It doesn't necessarily mean you're an active athlete to have it. It's your reputation. So we can all be working on our personal brand.
And I guess I'll throw in another question here. So in the letter, you mentioned it said, hi, Jason, and it was on a first name basis. Is there like do you go first, last name, or do you go first, considering that you don't necessarily know the person? What do you recommend?
It depends. I think we're in a phase of business, at least from my experience, that if you say Mr. So-and-so, it feels a little formal. And it also depends, like maybe you've gotten this person's email from DMing the company and the social media manager says, reach out to Jason. Or maybe like if you look at that letter, the person clearly the athlete's gone into the coffee shop, and whether they've met Jason there or had someone say, email our manager, Jason, something like that. So I think there needs to be some level of familiarity, but if it feels really awkward for you to be on a first name basis, go with Mr. or Ms. But I find first names, like when I get emails, Dear Cat or Hey Cat, I feel like I'm already friends with the person. So it's a little trick to feel like already comfortable with the person you're dealing with. Noted.
We just have one more comment here from Tanya. She enjoyed the insights shared, and they were great.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just wanted to actually wrap up with a special treat for Barbados athletes.
Yes.
I offer online branding and sponsorship coaching sessions, 60-minute sessions. And for every Barbados athlete that emails me within the next or before October 20th, I will actually give you a complimentary branding or sponsorship session. So that's a special treat for those of you that have listened and learned and want to take that next step to put your brand or sponsorship strategy into action. So Anicia, you can share my info again, or on the last slide, it's just pat@xoxosports.com, or you can DM me at XOXO Sports on Instagram. Of course, as I said, it goes down in the DMs, so don't worry about messaging me there. I'm always happy to hear from athletes, and I hope to hear from a lot of you because there's a lot of potential out there.
I'm hoping the viewers take up your opportunity, because I know you have a lot to offer. One-on-one sessions could give even more information, so I'm hoping at least you get a couple Barbadians, maybe other athletes who are watching as well. They could actually, reach out to you and get as much wealth of the information as possible. So I'm seeing a couple more. Just a few more comments here before we wrap up. You have one here from Chio K Holder.
Thank you. Oh, this is so nice.
then of course, this guy is saying, yes, for sure, he's going to reach out.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I'm excited. There's a lot of things that are very universal about sports marketing and branding. So even though I'm in Canada, I've worked with athletes in Nigeria, in Switzerland, South Africa, Barbados soon to be. So there's a lot of changes or there's a lot of consistencies I can apply.
Yep. And then you have here from me, Tanya, can administrators, coaches also consider similar branding strategies?
Absolutely. Actually, if you look at using tennis as an example from my previous work with the ATP player, if you look at players' boxes at a tennis tournament, a lot of times the coaches will have hats or shirts on. Those are branding opportunities for a sponsor. And sometimes sponsors actually do take advantage of that. You still have to remember, as a coach or administrator, you are still confined by the rules of what's allowed. So at the Olympics, there's rules around what coaches, basically it's the same rules. There's Rule 40 that applies to coaches and staff of an Olympic committee, and same with the Paralympics. And then even at other tournaments, just be really aware of what the rules are, because you don't want to say, oh, I'll wear your company's polo shirt when you can't actually do that. But the basics of brand building, putting together a consistent personal brand and bringing it to life, we all can do that. As I said, I do it personally and professionally. So it's, yeah, of course, and coaches and administrators. And I'd actually like to see more coaches and support staff take advantage of the opportunities they have, being on the sidelines, being at all the places an athlete is. There's a lot of opportunity for them as well.
Okay. Well, Katarina, I want to thank you for sharing your experience, your knowledge with us on the behalf of the Barbados Athletes Commission, of course, the Barbados Olympic Association, and the National Olympic Academy of Barbados. We thank you. As you can see from the comments, it was worthwhile information, and it is relevant. So thank you once again. We appreciate your time, and of course, that opportunity you're offering to the viewers to, check in with you and get some one-on-one counseling, coaching. So thank you
so much.
And, leading up into tomorrow is our last live session on the Arena 246. So we have Amaniki and Tristan Evelyn. They are going to be speaking about, the student athlete balancing but education and sport. And that is at 5:30 tomorrow. So I'm hoping that you all could join us for our final session, 5:30 here on YouTube. If you're joining from YouTube, if you're joining from Facebook, balancing education and sport. And Tristan Evelyn, she just represented us, Team Barbados at the 2020 Olympics. She's a former collegiate athlete, as well as Amaniki Wood. He is a national volleyball player and a former collegiate athlete. And that session is actually going to be moderated by academic advisor, former academic advisor from the University of Houston. So I'm hoping you all could join us tomorrow. Same place, same time, tune in, and I'll see you then. Good night, everyone.